Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mindset and Muscle podcast. I'm your host Keshi, and today we're here with Felicity Wingrove, or as commonly known as Fliss, and that's we just had a really nice talk about how she doesn't really like being like too formal, so we would just go ahead and refer to her as Fliss today. But Fliss, tell us a little bit more about you, what you do, and just you in general. Tell us everything.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to join you, Kashi. I'm so excited for our conversation. So I am a psycholinguist, which means that my degree, my kind of postgrad, my specialism is around the applied psychology of language. How do words impact us? How do they impact the story that we tell ourselves? In all of the relationships that we have in life, how can we bring conscious awareness to our communication so that we can make sure that our message lands exactly as we intend, but also so that we can hear what someone is actually saying to us and not the version of it that we might otherwise be telling ourselves. I've been doing that for about 25 years in the corporate world. So I work with a lot of CEOs and with boards, C-suite, but actually starting to move that much more now into the consumer arena. The more of us that know how to really positively and proactively take command of our communication, the better the world that we all live in is going to be. I sound a little bit like a beauty queen because it's like world peace, but I genuinely believe that if we can really get a handle on our comms, we can really start to up level the relationships that we have.
Perfect, perfect. So you talked about like communication and how it's really important to really hear what the person is saying and not just what we kind of want to hear. And that's really important and something that nobody really thinks about when they're having a conversation, but it happens all the time and can like lead to conflicts and things like that. So we're gonna get a little bit more into that later, especially for maybe like people in even like family or like relationships or kind of like those relationships that you don't want to go very like sour, so you want to be able to maintain as much as possible. But before we even get there, what are you mentioned something about communication preferences and filters in when we were chatting before. So I want you to explain a little bit more about what exactly are those and why are they important?
Absolutely. And brilliant question. So I don't know about you, but when I was brought up, my mum is a very wise woman. I have to cover that before I say how wrong she was. But she told me to speak to people how I would wish to be spoken to. And I don't know if you've ever heard anything similar.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and on the face of it, that feels like great advice. It's about engendering empathy and compassion and sameness in that relationship, whichever relationship that might be. Actually, it's the worst advice we can really follow because we need to speak to people how they would wish to be spoken to. Otherwise, it's the equivalent of setting foot in another country and shouting loudly and slowly, and then getting really frustrated when the other person doesn't understand us. We have up to around 400 separate filters and preferences that are really unusual, they're not necessarily unique. There are 400, so there are going to be other people in the world that have a similar overlay to you. But actually, the majority of people around you are going to want to be communicated with in a different way to you. But because we believe that we are normal and right and typical, we assume that anyone who doesn't hear what we're saying is either not clever enough to understand or that they're deliberately withholding the ability to connect. They're doing it deliberately to be awkward or to be aggressive or just to be a bit, a bit difficult. And neither of those are a particularly positive place to start in a relationship. And that could be a friendship, a romantic relationship, a family relationship, colleagues. It could be your boss. It could be the absolute top CEO, your boss's boss's boss. It's really not ideal if you are really disconnected. And as I say, there are 400. There are so many different preferences, but one of the main ones that really causes disconnect is around the amount of information that we each individually need to feel resourced to perform a task. So we split the world into roughly four categories. and we call it information density. How much information would you need to perform a task if I briefed it onto you and feel psychologically safe and resourced to deliver that? Feel really content in yourself. Problem comes that in most relationships, we find people with very, very different preferences. We've got a real detail person who likes to give you every facet of information that you might possibly need. And they tend to fall in love with or connect with someone who is really big picture, one liner, and then they're going to move on. And it just causes a real disconnect, real overwhelm. I was giving a talk in Excel over in one of the exhibition centres in London a few months ago. As a psycholinguist, we don't tend to get groupies. It's not really a very cool kind of, you're not celebs or anything. But as I came off stage, there was a woman waiting at the steps for me. And she greeted me really earnestly. She said, "I think you saved my marriage," which is really odd because it was a business conference. I said, "Oh, well, that's fabulous." Wow. And she said, "I thought I was going to go home from this conference and I was going to file for divorce. But hearing you speak, I recognize that my husband and I just speak very different languages. I'm going to go back and see if we can find some common ground." And that was one of the most amazing things that anyone had ever said. Isn't it wonderful that actually just conscious awareness of our difference could be enough to salvage an otherwise really strong relationship? That was me done then. I just thought, great, I need to do more of this. I need everybody to know that they are perfect and perfectly unique, but actually very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems really interesting to even, it seems like we're so on the surface right now, and it seems very interesting to try to like dive a little deeper and like swim those waters a little bit. You said there's like 400 of those communication preferences. So what, I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around what exactly they are. I get a little bit of an idea when you mentioned, for example, somebody might, for an explanation, need very, very detailed, and another person as few words as possible would be better, and then they're going to go and do it. That makes sense. What are some other examples of like the differences that maybe, yeah, the people listening could also have a better idea of like, okay, that's like a few things. Now I think I know what those like preferences and like and filters, like, are they different, like the preferences and filters as well?
Oh, completely, absolutely. So a lot of them, if you can imagine like an old kind of graphic equalizer that goes from a 0 all the way up to a 10 and then back down again, like a sliding scale, most of us will be somewhere on that scale of two really different types of preference. So if we look at one that's towards and away from, towards people are really motivated by gain, by opportunity, by more, by bigger, by better, by bolder. And then away from people are really motivated by moving away from risk. So I might, if I was going to write something, marketing collateral, for example, and you were towards person, I might talk about skyrocketing your profits, um, zooming ahead with your business, really positive, moving towards a goal. The opposite of that, it might be the hurdles to overcome, the pitfalls to avoid. The content in the center will basically be the same, but it's how you position it. So I always think of it like a diamond. You're looking at a two-dimensional face, but what you're going to be doing is pivoting it. It's a three-dimensional thing. You'll pivot it so that the face that the person is looking at actually best suits them, that it's easiest for them to understand. Alongside things like towards and away from, we've touched on this global and specific idea, which is really big picture and very, very detailed. There's also things like enthusiasm. So the enthusiasm that we need to bring to a task. So my husband is ex-military and he is probably a 2 or a 3 out of 10 on the enthusiasm scale. Very, very measured, very quite stern-faced, lovely, kind, gorgeous, adore him, obviously, but very measured. Whereas I am very much more, I'm probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I'm the equivalent of a children's TV presenter. At 5 in the morning, I'm super excited and ready for the day and smiling and happy and speak really quickly. Those are filters in terms of how we're showing up and how we're sharing our message. So what's really important isn't just to recognize where we are, although that's the perfect grounding place, the first point. It's then being able to recognize where somebody else is. And then it's being able to move towards them in an authentic way. So this isn't about you being someone or something that you're not. So if we take this enthusiasm as an idea, I'm not ever going to be able to fit in a 2 out of 10, very moderate, limited kind of facial expression, very, very calm. In an authentic way, it's not going to be me. But what I can do is take my 8 or 9, I can easily take it down to a 5 or a 6 and just be a little bit more measured. And I was asked by someone recently at a training that I gave whether this was inauthentic, but it's just the same as dressing for an occasion. So if you were going to go to lunch with some friends, you might wear jeans and a t-shirt, like a really nice jeans, a nice t-shirt, and nice heels. If you're going to a business meeting, you might wear a suit. You're still the same person underneath both of those outfits. You're just choosing how you show up as a version of yourself. This is that. This is recognizing where you are, recognizing where the other person is, and finding some way to meet them where they are.
Absolutely. When you're talking about you and your husband, I immediately thought your husband is a German Shepherd and you're a Golden Retriever. That's what I thought in my
Oh my
head.
goodness, yes,
Both.
absolutely. Very waggy-tailed, very.
But I was even like taking a couple like not notes but kind of questions that popped in my head because I had like three already just from like this little segment that you talked about. The first one, yeah, it's true. I have also heard people talk about how it's inauthentic if you're literally not the same person in every situation or every even like aspect of your life. And I'm like, well, that it doesn't sit well with me to be honest. Like you said, if you're going to a job interview, like it's different, and then depending on the job that you're going for, like let's just say you weren't wanted to join the military, but then you probably wouldn't just be showing your bubbly personality through and through. You want to show a little bit of like a more like kind of calm and collected. And it does make sense because the world does not revolve around like us either. We do have to kind of adapt to where we are. It's kind of, I feel like it's kind of rude to just think it's always okay to just be your authentic self, because if somebody else is in another situation and you don't want to like match that level, then like how do we even, I don't know, I feel like it's not the best of both worlds when people say that. What even
No,
is authentic? I'm like,
completely. But our authentic self, we are three-dimensional beings. We have
yeah, and we
all of
like
these
change,
different
yeah,
facets, right? You
yeah,
can't just show up in a two-dimensional way. So what I tend to find is the people who say, I'm just going to be me and I'm going to be my authentic self, actually, usually from a psychological perspective, they're really firmly entrenched in quite a moving away from philosophy. It's almost a, this is me and you'll like it or not. It's quite an aggressive move.
yes,
There is a real kindness in being adaptable, flexible, agile, dynamic, however you want to describe it. I am always me and I am always true to myself. But there are times when I'm 6 out of 10 and there are times I'm 10 out of 10. That I know is the scale and the scope that I have for flexibility. So I can speak in quite a measured way with lots of pausing as I am now. But actually, outside of this call, if I was on playing with my kids, I've got 2 young children, I'll be
yeah,
speaking way faster than this and probably more lyrically, and I'm really excited,
yeah,
and because it's appropriate to the situation, but also it's the gift that I'm giving to the people that I'm communicating with. I'm meeting them where they are and I'm bringing what they need of me. I'm not faking it. That is
yeah.
absolutely me, and we are these wonderful, rich, diverse, dynamic
Diverse,
characters.
yeah, we are able to like change and like adapt. And also
Sure.
like when people say authentic, I feel like sometimes I just want to just be completely honest without like consequences is usually what they want to say, but usually those people don't want to hear the same things back. I just think about it. I think one
Really?
teacher told me that when I was young, like if a 4-year-old girl were to come up to you and say and ask you like, do you like my dress, and if you didn't, would you just say no, that's an ugly dress? Like, is that what's authentic to you? But then like at the same time, like would like lying to them, like what is authentic and stuff, like you said, we just like it's not this like one thing that you're like just always say what's on your mind, and that's authentic. You have to be able to like you said, like have the other person in mind as well, and like be able to say what they in the way that they want to hear that information, not just what you want to do. But that was a little bit of a tangent. I was also
No, do you know,
thinking,
that's such great advice from your teacher. And, if there was that 4-year-old child, for me to be my authentic self, kindness is a really important value for me.
yes,
So for me to be
exactly.
authentic, if I hated the 4-year-old's dress, what I wouldn't say to her, I wouldn't lie and say, oh, I love it. I wouldn't be awful and say that I hated it. I would say, I love the fact that you are rocking that dress. I love the fact,
Yeah,
look how much you love that. Well done you for being so individual, or, well done you for choosing such a great color. Or I would find something that I could
yeah,
compliment her on without having to get into, she
yeah,
doesn't need my judgment and she doesn't need my
yeah,
approval. Actually, what she needs is a response to a communication. And for
yeah,
me to be authentic, I for me to be authentic, I need her to walk away from that exchange, whether she's 4 or she's 40 or she's 80 or she's 110. I want her to walk away from it feeling really good, because that's a huge part of my driver. I want the world. I can't touch everybody, but those few people that I do, I want them to feel better for that exchange. I want them to feel better about themselves or the world at large. There's enough
yeah.
negativity in the world. Let's kind of fill it with a bit of love and positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also thought about how you said going towards something versus going away from
Mm.
something. So is that what's per person really, or does that depend on the situation? For example, I'm thinking a very getting away from event would be a lot of people trying to lose weight, for example. And yeah, you could think of like going towards that dream body, but I'm thinking some events are more so like the pain is what is causing that more so than like wanting a six pack or something. So getting away from
Oh,
like maybe like
completely.
being a lot. On the other hand, maybe there are other just events that are more like going towards that. So like how does it work with like people's own like filters and preferences versus how we do change and evolve depending on the situation?
Again, brilliant question. And we can be towards in some areas of our life and away from in other areas. It's quite common for people to be away from where finances are concerned, because we aren't looking at growing our money massively. We're looking at keeping it safe.
Yeah.
So there are people, most people have a reasonably conservative risk appetite when it comes to investments, for example. They want to go for something where there's little chance they're going to lose their money, and they might make a little bit. Whereas there are other areas of their life they might take significantly more risk. The weight point is a really powerful one. So the majority of people that yo-yo diet are because they're away from motivated. They don't want to be heavy, or they don't want their clothes to be tight, or they don't want to feel frumpy on the beach and have to cover up. What happens is they'll reach a certain point in their weight loss journey when they no longer are those things, and their motivation goes away, and they'll start to put weight back on again, until they get to the point when the pain, the discomfort is great enough that they're away from motivation, kicks back in, and they'll push themselves again. For someone to have sustained weight loss, if we're using that example, they would need to switch their motivation. And you can do this actively, but they would need to switch it to be towards motivated. So I want to look strong and fit and lean on the beach. I want to have loads of energy. I want to end my day feeling strong and well. Any of those, whatever works for you in terms of the particular words, but that motivation is very much what you do want rather than what you don't.
Yeah, I would say like I do agree to that to a certain extent because like after my weight loss, I would say I didn't put it back on, but I have the fear of doing so. So I feel like even though it's not necessarily towards, I'm still thinking of like away from it, but it's still there. So I do kind of understand why people could, like if they're like super comfortable, like kind of like go and stuff. It is, however, I do agree that it's more difficult. It feels more difficult now to lose weight if I wanted to, just because I'm not in that like state of like I don't need to get away from something. I'm just like fine how I am. So like that like getting towards something feels a little bit like harder to like once you have it, it's probably great, but kind of like to work towards the other one, it's like not more it comes more natural trying to like run away from that thing. Um,
Completely. But from
Very
your
interesting.
perspective, just start changing your inner dialogue. So when we talk about communication, it's just as powerful, the words that we say to ourselves out loud or in our head. So start to reward yourself and recognize what you've achieved. When you look at yourself in the mirror, or when you put some clothes on and you feel fantastic, just remind yourself, I feel great. I feel really strong. I feel my, That's language that I use. And I like, I like to be strong and lean and energized because I've got a young family and I have to run around after them.
Yeah.
Congratulate yourself. Say, I feel really strong right now. I feel really lean. I love that I'm looking after myself. I'm looking at my body right now and I'm feeling really empowered. I love that I've done this for myself.
Absolutely.
However, whichever or any of that phraseology that works, or find something that does, but just really regularly repeat that. Our brain is the biggest supercomputer. It's an amazing, incredible, wonderful machine, but like computers, it runs on rails, it runs on rules. And there's a part of our brain called your RAS, your reticular activating system, and it's a collection of neurons by your brainstem. And the sole purpose of that is to filter out your reality. So when I say to people that your truth may not be the truth, it's actually
Yeah.
based in neuroscience. So your RAS, your reticular activating system, will work on what you can and can't see and perceive. We're subject to several 100,000 stimuli every second, and we actively process around 10 stimuli every second. Everything else is
Mm.
generalized, deleted, or distorted. We don't even consciously become aware of it. And we know this is working. I don't know if you've ever had a situation where a friend has told you that they're expecting a baby, and suddenly all you see around you are bumps and buggies and babies and just baby things. It's everywhere. Or you decide that you're going to buy a new car and you're going to buy a green car because nobody ever has a green car. And in front of you at the traffic lights is a green car, and you pull up on your driveway, and next door have just bought a green car, and you go to the supermarket. All of a sudden they're everywhere. And what really messes with your mind is the acceptance that they were always there. You just didn't see them because you didn't tell your brain they were important to you. So when you're looking at up leveling the language that you tell yourself, what you start to see is evidence that you are strong, that you are lean, that you are investing in yourself. Your brain has confirmation bias. It looks to prove that you're right, regardless of what you say. So if you were to say something negative or unkind about yourself, your brain, like a golden retriever, will go off out and will fetch the evidence and bring it back to you. So it really is important that we're mindful of the words that we use with ourselves as well as those we use with other people.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that's the confirmation bias is something that a lot of people know about and have heard of too, but we still sometimes not ignore, but we still don't say the nicest things to ourselves and let it happen, even though we have a little bit of control once we know, okay, maybe if we change a little bit the way we talk to each other,
Mm.
to ourselves, that would help. That's for sure. Now we're talking about
Mhm.
how other people have different communication preferences and filters. How do we identify those, and can we? And basically, how do we communicate with other people the way that they want to be communicated with?
It's that's that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And actually there are some really simple ways. So if we work on the basis that lots of communication is actually face to face, it's the easiest way to be able to judge and gauge whether your message is landing. There are cues in terms of someone's face, in terms of their how animated they are, whether they're nodding, whether they're smiling, whether they feel that there's a connection. There's a lot that we can really pick up, and those kind of intangible, energetic connections when you just feel that you're in rapport with someone. But actually, you can even tell all the way. I teach customer service based organizations how to support their team on things like WhatsApp for Business and Instant Messenger and live chat when you're looking at just a line or just a few words. Really, what you're looking to do is to make sure that that you are reflecting what the other person is telling you that they need. So if they are someone who on their message or in person, they're giving you like a real old chunky section of content with lots of context and lots of color and flavor. Meet them where they are. Don't go back with a one-liner. So, I don't know if you were asking me to organize dinner and you were giving me not just the restaurant and the time and the number of people, but you were telling me, which table you wanted and how much light you wanted and make sure it's not near here, but if you could make sure, if you're giving me all of that, I need to meet you there. I need to give you some detail back. There's no point in me responding going, yeah, great, I'll do that. you need to have the reassurance that I'm hearing you. Absolutely. I think this is the right table for us because it meets everything that you said. Actually, the light's great there. The weight is it's giving that context. What we can also do, if we're not sure where someone is, if we were looking at the information that they need to perform a task, for example, we can follow the formula that we use as marketeers. If you think about a web page, we start with a compelling headline, we go into a chunky paragraph of copy, we have 5 or 6 bullet points, and then we'll have a click through link for more information. And that covers each of the 4 information density preferences in the right order, because what we do psychologically when we've had sufficient information is we check out, we daydream. We don't necessarily know that we're doing it. We've got what we need. Our mind wanders onto the next task, or playing out something that happened yesterday, or just thinking generally about the day ahead. And we check back in once that brief is finished. Where we have a problem is if you flip that order, or if you really mix things up and you give an awful lot of information, and the big picture people have to try and cherry pick the core bits of information that they need from this tsunami of words. That's going to cause real psychological distress. So it's really about listening carefully to what someone is saying to you and how they're saying it. Are they saying it in a really infused manner? Is there a lot of information? Is there sparse information? Are they loud? Are they fast? Are they giving you an awful lot of sensory preferences? Are they talking to you about colors or sizes or shapes, or painting a picture with their words? Lots of this in communication, it has to be quite a rapid understanding, and it can be quite clumsy to start with. The first time you learn to drive, it feels overwhelming because there's so much to do. But there will be a time after you've passed your driving test when you land back on your drive in your car without consciously being aware of your journey home. You've gone into that automatic
Yeah.
state where you're perfectly comfortable performing the task and it just happens. That happens with communication when you start to bring awareness. So what I would say is gauge where they are and try and meet them authentically. So again, if we go back to the example of my husband and I'm never going to get to a 2 in the low enthusiasm scale, but I can meet him at a 5. If I want to be influential, if I want to put him at his ease in that conversation, I'm not going to show up as a 9 because the difference is too jarring. It will make him feel disconnected from me. But it's also about looking for signs that you might have got it wrong. So if you are, again, if you're face to face with someone, if they're not connected, they're going to start showing signs of discomfort or dis-ease. So we might blink more rapidly. You might see someone getting a stress response. So they might start flushing on the kind of around their collarbone and the base of their neck. That can be an example of being essentially triggered. What happens is blood flows to our extremities. It might be that they start getting a little bit tense in their fingers. They're gripping their hands, or they're moving their fingers. They're kind of touching them together, or they're kind of gripping them into fists. It might be that they turn away. It might be that they drop eye contact. They're going to be showing signs that they're not okay and that they're not really connected to what you're saying. And the more of that they show, the quicker you need to wrap up and try and step back in and build rapport.
Yeah, I was gonna say like this sounds like a little exhausting to be honest when like thinking about, oh well, this person is having like a big paragraph and like I'll try to match that, but then if somebody else is having like 2 words or something, for me that I'm like, if it sounded like a dating app or something, like sure that makes sense if they are replying with like, hey, I'm not interested, just I'm just like turned off by that. But just in general, like talking to people, it feels like sometimes what happens is if the person knows you, then when you try to match that level, they know slash feel that something is wrong because that's what I've heard too. If I feel like I'm talking, I mean, I don't think that like too much, but like sometimes it happens and I'm like, oh, that person like doesn't like talking too much. So I don't know if they like just listening more or just not having like longer conversations. So it does happen that I try to keep it like a little shorter, but then I have heard like, are you okay? Like your messages are like not as enthusiastic or something. So those people do like me being the way I am. It's just that they're not like that. They're just different. So where do I, yeah, because it just also, I guess that's 2 points, but I was saying like it sounds a little exhausting to try to like match that, but at the same time, like that's not necessarily what they want from us.
Sure. So I wouldn't say absolutely. I know that it sounds exhausting in the same way as anything that's new. Imagine learning to drive. So that you've never sat in a car in the driver's seat. The idea of having to do all of that just feels overwhelming. And yet very, very quickly you become a master at it and you're not even consciously aware that you're doing it. What I would say is from the communication perspective to just bring curiosity to meeting someone where they might be. And looking at the example that you gave, what I'm going to suggest is that you will already be curtailing some of the color and the detail and the whatever that you would otherwise bring to that friend because you know them. You might be moving from an 8 or a 9 down to a 6, and they might be a 2. You don't have to respond as a 2. That isn't you. And if you try to move past your authentic point, people will say to you, is everything okay? You don't seem yourself. You don't seem as enthused, or you don't seem. It's just about showing the agility and the flexibility. Where are they? How can I move towards them? You don't have to meet them where they are, just move towards them.
Yeah,
I find it
the
fascinating when
balance.
I meet new people, just to hear them, just to really actively listen to them, and to try and give them my message in a way that's going to land most powerfully for them. And you know when it does, because someone starts getting really excited. They're like, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of that, or I've just written that down, or that brilliant. That's when you know that you've really landed it. And if that message matters, so in a relationship, in a work context, in an interview, in just day-to-day life, if it matters, it's really important that you do land it. I liken it to a Chinese whisper that goes 20 people down the line, and the message is so compelling that when it's repeated back to you at the end of that line, it's exactly as you started. That's the point at which you can really start to change hearts, change minds, positively influence your workplace or your relationships or your friendships, and do that in an ethical, kind of really empowered way. That's my
Right.
world peace thing, isn't it? There's me and me like changing the world. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I'm starting to wonder, is it different for strangers when we meet them and kind of like family and like partners and friends? Like, how does it change in terms of maybe the level that we try to adapt or change, or even the extent to which it's important, I guess. Like, and first of all, in which situation as a which person, but also which situation as in happy versus angry moments, like in conflicts. Is that more important or it's important just like all the time?
I mean, ultimately, it's important all the time. But what I would say is we actually give strangers much more grace than we give the people that
Yeah,
we live with and we connect with on a
totally.
daily basis. Familiarity breeds contempt is a very famous phrase, isn't it? And actually, there's so much truth there. We sometimes can assign an unkind or an unhelpful interpretation of, if we think about our partners, I think about my husband. I recognize the fact that he is much more succinct than I am. He's very much more grounded. He uses concrete examples. I'm much more evocative. I use lots of flowery language. I'll use 3 or 4 adjectives. He'll use one in every couple of sentences. We're very different in our communication style. Now, I will bring so much compassion and grace to a conversation with a stranger at the train station that I have to remind myself to bring to the most important relationship in my life, which is with him and with the children. And
Why is that? Because that's
we
true.
often
It's like, why is
say
that?
again, yeah, yeah. I mean, because they are familiar to us, we become really safe and familiar. When something is really familiar, we can absolutely start to take it for granted. And we tell ourselves stories. So the brain evolved storytelling as a way of keeping us safe. And we tell ourselves stories about someone's intent all the time. I don't know if you've ever been in the situation where you've gone to meet some girlfriends for lunch. You walk into the restaurant, you can see them over the other side, they're laughing, they're joking. You approach the table and they go quiet. Now you can tell yourself the story that they were talking about you or being unkind or that you've caught them out in some way. Or you can tell yourself the story that they're planning a surprise birthday party for you or a surprise something. And that's why they're stopping. And if you imagine each of those stories, imagine believing those, imagine how you would react, what you would say, how you would say it, and imagine how that lunch would play out and the experience that everyone would have, because your reaction would cause a chain reaction. They would respond in a certain way, which would confirm, or it would absolutely confirm whatever it was you thought. And you're going to go into this negative or positive spiral of connection or a difference and distance. When it comes to our loved ones, our partners, the people that we're most familiar with, actually, it's about reminding ourselves, I wonder what's going on for them right now. I wonder what they need from me to be able to hear what I'm actually saying. We devote such a lot of emotional, mental, even physical energy into the discourse with the people that we love the most, the people that we spend the most time with. Um, and often that message isn't landing, that the energy is spent trying to understand why they've just, gotten really upset about something that we've said, when clearly that wasn't what we meant. My view is we need to take 100% responsibility for our message. We need to. It's my communication with you now, it's 100% on me. If I'm not landing it, that's my opportunity to take it back and to reframe it or to reface it and to try again. Because it really matters to me that you understand not just what I'm saying, but how I'm saying it. I want you to understand that depth and that density and all the flavor behind it. But actually, it's just as important that my message about dinner lands with my husband, or that my message about a client project lands with my colleagues tomorrow morning, or with a client, or it's just about bringing that, as I say, compassion, curiosity. I wonder what's going on for them right now. I wonder what story they're telling themselves, and I wonder how I can best reassure them.
Yeah, and I'm still thinking about how you talked about how we give grace to everyone else except our closest ones. And I always say we get I always ask people, like, who do you get the like angriest at? Your loved ones. So probably your partner, who has seen you at your angriest, probably your partner, and probably like maybe your mom or something if you're in a close relationship with that. And I have thought about this quite a bit, about why do we do that? We love those people so much. Why are they who see the angriest side of us? But that's probably because, especially thinking about like my mom, for example, I do feel safe, like you said, and there's no part of me that thinks she's gonna leave me if I happen to like explode or something. Um, on the other
Completely,
hand, if it's
completely. And
somebody I just met, yeah, I was like, well, that person, like I or a friend, like they're gonna like just not want to be friends with me anymore. But if it's your husband, if it even though technically a boyfriend or husband could still leave, like in your mind when you're safe, you're like, they're here, they're it's fine. Like I have the
yeah.
I guess like not right, but they give you that privilege of like being able to like get angrier than you would accept from like other people and still like put up with you is what I think about. But then my question is, how do we, despite that, so we should feel safe with those people. That's good. But how do we,
Mm.
despite that, try to give them more grace and more patience? How do we kind of do the opposite of what we're automatically drawn to do, which is just kind of being like, hmm.
Partly, and that's such brilliant awareness that you've got. So few people have the emotional intelligence to recognize as they're going through something, or to reflect back on their behavior and kind of go, do you know what? I feel psychologically safe right now with you. I can be my whole self. We are brought up, particularly in the Western world, we are brought up in a society that suggests, particularly as women, there's a very much a good girl kind of philosophy, that there is a right way and a wrong way to behave. And actually, we are wonderful three-dimensional beings. We laugh and we cry. We are beautifully behaved and we are badly behaved. And I'm using that in a kind of inverted commas sense because there's very much judgment around that. No emotion is bad. An emotion is simply chemical encoded or chemically encoded message in our brain. It's absolutely real. And anger in particular is wildly helpful. It shows us that a boundary's been crossed. It's really
Yeah.
important that we feel a surge of anger and that we feel able to express it. And actually, there are times that we won't express it as eloquently as we might, and we might behave in our own way
Sometimes we just
badly.
cry.
Absolutely. But I think again, there's the compassion, the self-compassion to say,
Yeah.
wow, I think about my youngest, my daughter is only 6. And I had a conversation with her yesterday, and she had some really big feelings. And I had to explain to her that your feelings, absolutely honor those feelings. Don't sit in them for too long, but just honor them, really feel them,
Yeah.
because they're your feelings and they're big. And actually, your body is not huge. They're really big feelings for a little body. And there are times actually that a really good cry or a bit of a rage, and let's just transit those emotions out of your body. That's absolutely fine. You are wonderful as you are. Just feel what you're feeling, honor it, and then at the right time for you, take a breath and say, okay, I'm going to move past these now because it's not my truth. That's how I'm feeling in the moment, and I'm going to be there. With our loved ones, I think if we're able to say to them, I feel really angry and I'm reacting in a way that doesn't feel fair to you. It's not about you, it's about the situation, or it's about what's going on for me right now. But even if you say this afterwards, I really want to honor the fact, or I really want to thank you for the fact that you've created a space where I can be all of myself. I don't just have to bring the good bits, the shiny bits, the
Yeah.
clean bits. I can bring the shadow side of me, and I can be a three-dimensional, wonderfully, perfectly imperfect person.
Yeah.
None of us are perfect. Everyone seems to be striving for this perfection. I am grouchy some mornings. I have big feelings. I'll sit and deliberately put a real weepy film on because I'm just feeling a bit low and I could really do with a good old cry. I have other moments when I'm the best company and I'm excited and I'm enthusiastic and I'm dragging my friends along on some adventure and they're all talking about it being the best day ever.
Yeah.
None of those are good or bad. They just are. I talk about reporting the weather. When we report the weather without judgment, it might be raining, it might be sunny. That's okay. There is no judgment about it.
Yeah.
It just is. And I think we need to bring that compassion to ourselves and not worry about just showing up. I think if we're in relationships and we're just showing up with the good stuff, people miss so much wonder. I think about my deep friendships where people do show up with mascara under their eyes and
Yeah.
a runny nose or with rage or really just not in their best, in inverted commas, state. Those are the friendships I value the most because those are the friendships that are real and I get to see behind the curtain to the true wonderful individual that they are. And from a communications perspective, it's even more important that we hold the space for someone and that we say to them, I can see right now you've got some really big feelings. I'm gonna be here. You do you. It's all gonna be okay. Let me know when you want to talk. But I'd love much more of that in the world, rather than people feeling that they have to sanitize and shut down, make small, all of that. It's that worries me because emotion that's stored in our body will always come out. But the more we tamp it down, the more unpredictable it will be when it eventually does kind of erupt.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. Yeah, and you also never really want to be like feeling stuck somewhere where you can't be your full self. Like if you, especially like, again, it depends. I'm not gonna go cry to my like hairdresser or something, or like the first person, first story I see. But if it's your husband, or if it is a very close person to you, you should be able, like, if you're scared that if they see the full you, they're just gonna walk away. That's not a very nice place to be either. That feels pretty suffocating, I would say.
Mm.
So that's fair.
But I
That's a
think
very
also, no, completely. But I think also give them the gift of letting them know what you need from them. So again, going back to my lovely husband, he is a very practical guy. Now, when we first met, I'm a really capable. I'm very much a feminist. I'm an empowered woman. I run businesses. If I could tackle a lion, I would. It's that whole like really empowered piece. And I can remember talking to him about things, and he was trying to fix them for me because that's his personality. He wants to make the world a better place for me. He wants to help me and support me. And I was feeling patronized by his solutions because in my head, the story I told myself was that he was coming up with solutions because he didn't think that I could handle it. None of that was the truth. I had to unpick it myself. So what I do now is when I sit down with him, I will say to him, can I have a vent? I've had
Hmm.
some stuff's gone on today. I just need to process it. I process. So again, one of our preferences, I process externally. So I will talk something out, and that will help me find kind of
But I
equilibrium
don't need a
inside.
solution. I just need you to listen. It's often what
Completely.
girls do.
That's
Yeah.
exactly. So what I'll say to him is, I need you to listen. I've got my solutions. I need you to listen. I need
Yeah.
you to sympathize. By all means, give me feedback. What I don't need you to do is give me a solution, because I know what I'm going to do about this. This is just
Yeah.
a venting. There's other times I'll say to him, I need to talk to you. I'm not quite sure what to do. I'd really love your insight. But you frame it at the very beginning. And we will sometimes do that with colleagues if we're having a conversation, a professional conversation, but we rarely do it with our loved ones, with our friends and our family.
Yeah. That's
And
true.
actually, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're listening to someone telling you something, and in your head, you're thinking, I'm not sure what they need from me here. They'll get to the
Yeah. Yeah.
end of the story they're telling, then they tell you what they need, and you almost have to go all the way
Do
back
the
to the
whole
beginning
story.
and tell the story to yourself again to work out what's expected of you.
Yeah.
Word. It would be so much easier if I just said to you, Keshi, can I just have a bit of a rant? Can you hear me out? Tell me if you think I've been a complete, idiot. But actually, I just really feel like I just want to get this off my chest. It's playing on my mind. Can I just? You know what to do. You know how to act. You can be your authentic self. You can hold the space for me in the way that I need. So few of us gift the people that we care about the ability to stand up for us and be there for us in the way that we need them to. And then we tell ourselves stories. We think back to the woman that was talking about the information density preferences, that was waiting at the steps at that business conference. She told herself so many stories about how her husband wasn't showing up for her in the way that she needed. And actually, they were just speaking different languages.
Yeah.
The story that she was telling was her truth, but it wasn't the truth. And they're really different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That. Yeah. And we're going back to like that story again, just thinking about how at the end of the day, it's really understanding like the communication and like being aware and trying to work on it too. Fliss, thank you so much for your time today. We're already like around the hour mark. Even if we started a little bit late, I'm sorry. So we'll wrap up. But before that, I want you to, if you have anything that you want to add as well, let us know where we can find you. Or like your socials and anything like that, and how people, yeah, can reach you, all this fun stuff. Like you can plug yourself right now.
Oh, no, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I've so loved our conversation. It's just whizzed by. So thank you for the opportunity. So my business is called The Ultimate Advantage, and we're the-ultimate-advantage.com. On the social channels, it's always The Ultimate Advantage, or you're welcome to find me, Felicity Wingrove, known as Fliss, but always Felicity Wingrove on things like LinkedIn and whatnot. I share all sorts of snippets and advice and guidance around kind of comms, but really just the hugest thank you to you for all of the amazing conversations that you have and the awareness that you raise, but just for the opportunity to bring this out and start getting people to get curious about what might be going on for them comms wise. It's an absolute gift, and I'm super grateful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you once again. It was super helpful, both for me and also for, I'm sure, people listening. So that was a wonderful conversation. And thank you for your time as well. For people listening, thank you very much for being here as well. I hope you got a few nuggets of information and golden nuggets, like we say, from this. And again, you can find her at, I want you to say that again with the hyphens and everything. Where can
Yeah,
we find you again? Like
the-ultimate-advantage.com.
the-ultimate-advantage.com. So again, thank you everybody for watching / listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.